Anybody remember Uriel's Chasm, that game that I taunted by saying you'd never hear about it again and have now brought it up again twice? Uriel's Chasm was actively trying to be the worst game on Steam, not realizing how tall a challenge that is. It was super short, had a plot that very deliberately made no sense, made multiple artistic choices so beyond bizarre that they could only be intentional, riffed on those old Bible games the Angry Video Game Nerd reviewed, and was interspersed with completely pointless live-action clips of terrible actors weakly pretending to go insane. It was followed by a sequel that had nothing to do with the first game, not that that's a bad thing, and had an interesting story premise of a self-aware video game character pondering their existence that was wasted on a game that was too hard and confusing to complete. Both games were made by a developer who goes by the name Railslave, and as bad as those games are, there's enough craftsmanship to tell that they both came from somebody with talent. That's why I decided to check out some of Railslave's other games instead of focusing on what is clearly his lowest point. And this quest took me to his highest rated game on Steam, Selfie, Sisters of the Amniotic Lens. The intro probably clued you in that this didn't go well. On the game's main menu, you get a news report from this guy with white plugs in his nose. He tells you the 6 members of some coven, the Sisters of the Amniotic Lens, who believe their wounds are gateways to another dimension, have been found dead with a 7th member unaccounted for.
The Sisters of the Amniotic Lens were short-lived and believed their wounds were gateways into another dimension.
Then it cuts to a wall of vaguely religious-sounding text, and then another screen of vaguely religious-sounding text. I like how the game flat-out says, read this passage in the Bible to have any idea what's going on because I can't be bothered to explain it. So now the game starts. I'm in a room full of flies. There's a computer. Dead naked woman stick to the wall with her arms and legs cut off. That's charming. What do I do? Can't move. None of the buttons do anything. Okay, I'll restart the game. Maybe I missed something in the text walls. Oh, you keep the mouse cursor trained on one fly at a time to psychically link them with the amniotic lens so they can chart your path to another dimension. How on earth did I miss something so obvious? The TV comes on and you're supposed to scroll the television channels until you find a person in the screen. I keep seeing a woman's face, but I keep this up for like 5 minutes and nothing happens. Restart again. What else did I miss? Oh, you have to hold the right mouse button to focus on the screen or else it doesn't count. Okay, now we're doing the thing that advances the game. And now I'm in space with wireframes of those skeletons they used to make dresses spinning around, none of which seem to do anything. I am so far beyond confused right now. After floating around lost another 5 minutes, I figure out there's a red dot inside one of the dress frames. You fly to it, you shoot it while it sits perfectly still, and eventually it flies off into the middle of space, so a bunch of flies spawn around the dot, and you have to shoot the flies to make the dot turn solid so you can shoot it to go into a tunnel and end the stage and return to the main room with the flies. Yeah, I don't know what just happened, not gonna lie. Okay, at the start of each level you're shown a milk carton with a different missing woman on the side, and you're told this plane has a bunch of souls awaiting judgment, so maybe you're the 7th sister rescuing the souls of the dead coven members? It doesn't explain why there are wireframes of dress frames sitting out in space, but it's enough of a foothold in logic for me to continue. So I hope you enjoyed that first level that I just walked you through, because the game forces you to play this exact level 6 times. I'm not cheating you. You scan the 6 flies, surf the TV, shoot the red dot in space, and this one level loops 6 times, and that's the entire game. You scan the flies again, you turn the TV again, you float around and shoot the stationary red dot again. The layouts of the levels never change, no new mechanics ever get added, there's no boss, there's no change in the difficulty. Shit, there's so little gameplay I don't think you could amp up the difficulty anyway. The dev made one freaking level, flat out copied and pasted it with different music each time and called it a day. There is no excuse for this level of laziness. I almost don't even care that the game is confusing. My biggest problem with the game is that it's boring. You barely do anything beyond lazily drag a mouse cursor over a screen. It is completely impossible to fail at any of the game's objectives or to lose the game. There's no urgency and no sense of purpose since you don't know what the hell you're doing, and every step of the gameplay is so abysmally slow-paced the whole thing turns into a tedious chore. The only hard part is just not shutting the game off from boredom. The worst part of the game is when you have to shoot the flies at the end of the space segments. The flies move at a decent speed, your weapon only fires for an instant, it requires pinpoint accuracy, you need to shoot a fly several times for it to work, and flies actually disappear for no reason if you hit them but don't kill them quickly enough. But again, it's not like you're actually doing anything vaguely important other than trying to get the game over faster, so it's just a dull slog. At the start of each level, you're given another wall of pretentious, vaguely religious-sounding text to read. My best guess is that these walls are being narrated by the seventh sister, but the walls are pretty much gibberish unless you screen cap all 6 and read them in order. Okay, the narrator met an angel when she was a kid. The coven took the narrator and abused the shit out of her to try and get an angel back. He's totally an angel-like for reals. The sisters are total shit stains and the narrator was left totally empty and defiled by their abuse. The angel came back and synchronizes flies to enter the other dimension, whatever, and the other sisters shun the angels because they only see the evil in things, and best guess, if you see evil, then you are evil and God won't show you the truth. Okay, so maybe we're not rescuing the souls of the dead sisters, but instead we're finding the angel in the story? If so, why do we have to find him 6 times? Are we playing as the dead sisters before they died, and the 7th is the dead lady staked to the wall? Because that doesn't really track with the intro, and the more I think about it, we have to be playing as the 7th sister because she's the only one the angel taught to use the flies. You know what? Fuck it! None of this shit matters because the game doesn't have an ending. Whatever in the hell kind of story is trying to be told cuts off without any resolution, so none of this vague bullshit has any meaning. You want to know what happens when you finish all 6 carbon-copied non-gameplay levels? Because this was the moment when I realized that I had to talk about this game. When you beat the 6th level, Railslave himself comes on screen.
And that was it. And there was morning and evening, the 7th day.
He tells you point blank that the story is about the narrator of the text walls, a naive person being manipulated by the people around her until her dreams are crushed. Mean people who only see the evil in the world and don't even look for the good.
What was all this about? In another respect, it was all about a person that was horribly manipulated, a naive person who was horribly manipulated by people that can only see the evil in things and don't look for the good.
He reiterates this point at least 3 times. At one point I think he quotes scripture to explain why you should never post anything negative online, and then, on what I'm sure is a totally unrelated note, he announces that he's quitting game development.
This is my final game, and I wish you all the best in life.
Wow, subtle diatribe, dude. So basically this entire game was just a soapbox for Railslave to bitch about how nobody likes his video games. Think about it. The story and gameplay don't have a single connection beyond the text explaining why there are so many flies, and the story is nothing except the anonymous narrator bitching about how horrible people abused them. The narrator made something appear, was abused by people until they produced another one, which was rejected by the very people who sought it out because they only see the bad in what the narrator produces. The parallels are blatantly obvious. This entire game is just one giant diatribe for Railslave to complain about how his games aren't successful. To complain, people only see the bad, nobody ever talks about the good parts of my games. He thinks it's his audience's fault for not liking his shit because we just don't get it, because we just don't even look for the good in his games. It's our fault his games suck. I might be more sympathetic to Railslave venting his frustrations with game development if he didn't put this rant in such a phoned-in dumpster fire. Selfie is one shitty level that barely has any gameplay, copied 6 times, strung along a completely unrelated plot that's just the devs subtextually yelling "you suck" over and over again, and this is where he decided to whine that people hate his games unfairly? This is so not helping your case, dude! I think the most face-palm-worthy part of this whole speech is when he pulls out a painting that he really likes. It's a recreation of the Madonna and Child that he uses for the loading screens, where Mary is hidden in a cloak that's designed to look like a cosmic space horror at first glance. He plays it up like this giant gotcha moment, like, "Aha! You only saw a monster in the painting because you only see evil!" When, no, we saw a monster because that's what the painting was explicitly designed to do. And also because he photoshopped Mary's eyes out of the game's loading screens to make sure nobody got the symbolism until he explained it to look smart. And then he completely loses his train of thought and just rambles about the painting some more.
Around his head is wrapped seaweed instead of a crown of thorns. The reason for this is in the book of Jonah, when Jonah is cast over the side of the boat, he has a short kind of poem.
Absolutely mind blown that this pile of shit has a positive net review score. I dug into the user reviews to try and figure out just what in the heck I was missing, and most of the positive reviews praise the game as a social experiment. When you start the game, you're prompted to fill in a username and what tears do you cry that are worth bottling, basically asking you to fill in your deepest regret, secret, fear, sin, or just whatever you want off your chest. When you're in the space flying levels, you can find wireframes of bottles floating around, and the bottles look like stars from far away, so unless you research to know to look for the bottles, you'll never find them to know that this multiplayer component even exists. But if you fly into a bottle, you're shown the username and message of somebody else who's played the game, at which point you can choose to condemn or free them. If you click free, you can then type a message to the player in question. Basically, the online content is an experiment at creating an online anonymous support group where people vent their deepest pain and get feedback from the community. Even in the short time I went through these messages, I found people who were suicidal, vulnerable people who could have easily been sent over the edge by one asshole clicking condemn or typing a horrible comment, and God forbid this may have actually happened and I just didn't find out about it. Most of the feedback in the reviews talks about how cathartic it was for people to unload their emotional baggage in a quasi-public forum and find support, and I found one posting by a person saying the support they found in the game got them through a tough spot in their lives, so I hope Royal Slave appreciates how lucky he is that this little experiment of his didn't blow up in his face. I also don't recommend checking the game out now for this feature because the game is 3 years old and the community looks pretty well dead. I'll leave it to the comments to discuss if this was a legitimately good idea to try and help people, or if Royal Slave was completely out of line toying with people's deepest insecurities in the name of a social experiment, but here's my problem. If Rail Slave was really concerned about making an online support group app, why would he hide it completely unadvertised in a completely unrelated video game hidden behind a completely batshit interface and with minimal messaging capabilities? It just feels tacked onto the game when a system where people vent their demons in public for support should be handled with way more care and oversight, given the vulnerable people that such a system is designed to attract. Selfie is a horrendous game. The gameplay is boring, the design is lazy, the story is pointless, and finding out it was only made for the dev to whine over his lack of success just adds insult to injury. It's nice that some people did find help in their lives through the online component of the game, but that has to have been through sheer luck because there are so many ways having people spout their deepest insecurities to randos with an unregulated ability to type responses and click condemn could have gone disastrously wrong. I should end things here, but I bought another of Rail Slave's games and I do not want to make another video about this guy, so... Snowflake Tattoo is one of the games that Railslave made before Uriel's Chasm and Selfie, i.e. before he lost his mind, assuming that he ever had one. You play as a pilot driving around a prison in outer space, rescuing women who, for some reason, are called doll steaks. There is more plot beyond that, but it's all given to you in lines of text that appear in the middle of the game when you're trying to play. Nobody's going to read that shit! This is a straightforward arcade game. You zoom around a map rescuing prisoners and then head to the exit. To fight the enemies, you use the mouse cursor to spray fire over the floor, but you have to be careful because you can hurt yourself with the fire. It's a unique and interesting mechanic. The controls are smooth and it's intuitive to pick up and play, so Railslave is capable of making a real game when he overcomes his own pretentiousness. The game isn't horrible, but it's way more annoying than fun. It's kind of a cool gimmick that the game blacks out everything that's not in your direct line of sight, but you can barely see anything around you because the camera zooms in so close, and about half the screen is obscured in text boxes, a character outline, and a circle with a symbol that doesn't mean anything. It's a royal pain in the ass. Because of the shit visibility, enemies just seem to come out of nowhere, and they fire the split second that you're in view. You can't react, so it's blind luck if you can avoid getting hit every time an enemy spawns. But what really cheats cheeses my biscuits is that the dolls spawn at complete random, and I think only 2 dolls out of 10 spawn at a time. I caught the game red-handed, not spawning a doll until I'd picked up a different one. It pretty much tosses all strategy out the window. You can go over a single stretch of level 5 times, you come back later and there's a doll there, and often they'll spawn in the middle of flames from where you fought enemies earlier in the level, so there's no way out of taking a hit. The gameplay basically just boils down to dashing aimlessly around the stage, just hoping you stumble across enough dolls before dying from all the unavoidable cheap damage, and the entire thing feels more like an exercise in luck than anything. After a few rounds of practice, I get all 10 girls, and now I have to find an exit, but you have less than a minute to find the exit before you freeze to death. An indicator appears pointing you to the exit, but the last doll can spawn so far away that you just can't reach the exit before time runs out. And even when I followed the compass to the exit, there's nothing here! So what the hell? My best guess is you're supposed to find the one spot in the level where your light creates the shape that appears in the circle, but don't ask me why the game gives you 2 completely contradictory sets of directions if that's the case. I can't find the one arbitrary identical looking spot that ends the level, which you're apparently just supposed to stumble across with 0 guidance, so to hell with it. You know, Snowflake Tattoo could have been a kick-ass arcade game with a few tweaks. Nerf the enemies so they don't constantly get cheap shots on you, clean up the HUD and pull the camera back so you can see what you're doing, spawn all 10 girls at once and just have a normal exit with a normal compass pointing to it. That's it! Rail Slave was so close to having a good game, and he just didn't. The guy could be a great game designer if he actually prioritized game design, but his first and last concern with all of his games seems to be whether they're artsy enough regardless of how well they play, and rather than learn his lesson, he was content to make an entire game whining about his lack of acclaim. Alright then, I'm never looking at this dev again then. And I mean it this time. I wash my hands of this weirdness.
You have failed for the last time. You will not have an opportunity to do so again.